Margaret Dawson, at 60, had grown accustomed to the quiet solitude that filled her life. Every morning, she visited the Lakeside Wellness Center for her swim, the water offering her peace and an escape from the silence that had followed her since her husband passed. Today, as she finished her laps, she wrapped herself in a towel and wandered absent-mindedly towards the changing rooms, her mind adrift in thought. Pushing open the door, Margaret immediately sensed something was off. The scent of cologne and the sight of men's clothes scattered on the benches told her she had made a mistake. Her heart quickened as her eyes landed on a young man, half-dressed, his body glistening from his workout. He looked up, startled but amused. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Margaret stammered, her face flushing. "I didn't realize." The man, Ethan, smiled warmly, his deep blue eyes locking onto hers. "It's all right," he replied, his voice smooth and calming. "No harm done." Margaret hesitated, torn between embarrassment and an unexpected flutter in her chest. She hadn't felt so vulnerable, so alive in years. His gaze lingered on her, not with judgment, but with a soft curiosity that made her pulse race. "I should go," she murmured, turning to leave. Before she could slip away, Ethan's voice gently called after her. "I'm Ethan, by the way." She paused, glancing back. "Margaret." His smile widened. "Nice to meet you, Margaret. Maybe I'll see you again." Her breath caught, and with a quick nod, she left, her heart still racing. Something had shifted, something unexpected, and it left her breathless. The next morning, Margaret couldn't shake the memory of Ethan. His face, his smile, and the warmth in his eyes lingered like a faint echo in her mind. She found herself glancing at the clock, wondering if he'd be at the gym again. It was ridiculous, she thought. He was so young, and yet that moment in the changing room had stirred something in her long dormant. Despite her better judgment, Margaret returned to the Lakeside Wellness Center at the same time, her heart racing with anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The familiar routine felt different today, charged with an energy she couldn't quite explain. She completed her laps, but her mind was elsewhere, focused on whether she'd see him again. As she stepped out of the pool, drying off, she spotted him across the room, standing near the weight machines. "Ethan." Her heart skipped a beat. She could feel his eyes on her before she even looked up, and when their gazes finally met, he smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a rush of warmth through her. She hesitated, unsure whether to approach him or let the moment pass. But before she could decide, Ethan walked over, his presence calming yet magnetic. "Back again?" he asked, his voice soft yet teasing. Margaret chuckled nervously. "I suppose I am." There was a beat of silence, and in that quiet exchange, something unspoken passed between them. He wasn't just being polite. There was curiosity in his gaze, a spark that mirrored the one flickering in her heart. "I was hoping I'd see you again," Ethan said, his eyes never leaving hers. Margaret's breath caught. Something was beginning, and neither of them could deny it. Days turned into weeks, and Margaret found herself returning to the Lakeside Wellness Center with a new sense of anticipation. Each time, Ethan was there, waiting, or perhaps it was mere coincidence, but the chemistry between them was undeniable. Their conversations grew longer, deeper, lingering well past the usual pleasantries. One afternoon, after another swim, Margaret found Ethan waiting for her by the poolside, towel slung over his shoulder, his easy smile disarming as ever. This time, though, something was different. The air between them felt charged, their silences filled with the weight of something unspoken. "Coffee?" he asked, his voice low and hopeful. Margaret hesitated. She hadn't been on a date, or anything that resembled one, in over a decade. Her heart told her yes, but her mind raced with questions. What would people think? What would she think? He was so young, and the idea of them together seemed impossible, even ridiculous. Yet there was something about Ethan that made her feel alive, seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. "I don't know if that's a good idea," she replied, her voice faltering as her pulse quickened. "Why not?" he asked softly, stepping closer. "Age is just a number, right?" His words cut through the cloud of doubts, and Margaret felt her resistance crumbling. Ethan wasn't pressuring her. He simply wanted to spend time with her. And she wanted that too, more than she was willing to admit. Finally, she nodded. All right. Coffee. Ethan's smile widened, and for the first time in years, Margaret felt a spark of excitement she hadn't known she could feel again. She wasn't just treading water anymore. She was diving into something new, something real. Margaret sat across from Ethan in a quiet corner of a cozy cafe. The gentle hum of chatter and the aroma of fresh coffee created an intimate atmosphere. She looked at him, studying his youthful face, the way he leaned in as if eager to hear every word she said. She hadn't expected this, a real connection, one that felt as easy as it was intoxicating. As they talked, time seemed to blur. They shared stories, her life full of years and experiences, his full of dreams and possibilities. And yet, despite their differences, there was a surprising understanding between them, as if they had found something in each other that they didn't even know they needed. I've never met someone like you, Ethan admitted, his voice soft, almost vulnerable. You make me feel grounded. Margaret's heart fluttered. It was such a simple thing to say, yet it struck her deeply. She had always thought her time for romantic connection had passed, that such emotions were reserved for the younger, the more carefree. But here she was feeling something so real, so unexpected. The conversation shifted, and soon Ethan's hand brushed against hers on the table. The touch was gentle, tentative, but electric. Margaret's breath hitched. She didn't pull away, letting the warmth of his skin seep into hers. I'm not sure where this is going, Margaret whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and excitement. Does it matter? Ethan replied, his gaze steady and full of promise. For the first time in years, Margaret allowed herself to let go of the doubts. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and as their lips met in a soft, tender kiss, Margaret realized that sometimes life offered second chances in the most unexpected ways.